Some moments in life seem so unremarkable at first, but later you realize they were the precise points where everything changed. Anthony, at 61, was a kind-hearted man who always put the well-being of his loved ones first. When he invited his cherished nephew, Eric, to stay with us, I had no idea how much my life was about to transform. Anthony's serious expression is etched in my memory when he said, "Daisy, Eric's a sensitive young man. You know how hard it is for him to sleep at night. Take good care of him, all right? He needs to get back on track before starting university." I nodded, unaware of the whirlwind that awaited me. Who could have known that we'd receive the long-anticipated call about the house we wanted? Or that Anthony would leave for 3 days to inspect it, leaving me alone with Eric. At 20, Eric wasn't a boy anymore. His tall stature, broad shoulders, and confident demeanor made that clear. But to Anthony, he remained the same little nephew he had always adored. As for me, I couldn't ignore the peculiar warmth that Eric's presence always brought me, an unspoken tension I had tried countless times to dismiss. This time, the thought of being alone with him for 3 days stirred a mixture of anticipation and unease. As Anthony loaded his bags into the car, he paused and turned to me one last time. With a reassuring smile, he said, "3 days will fly by before you know it." But those 3 days were destined to change everything. Eric approached me quietly, adjusting the strap of his bag on his shoulder. When our eyes met, he gave me his signature smile, a blend of playfulness and sincerity that made my heart race. "Looks like it's just the two of us now," he said, his voice calm yet carrying an undeniable weight. At that moment, a strange exhilaration swept over me. Eric had matured into a man, but being left alone with him was a completely different matter. I couldn't have foreseen the events of that night, yet I knew deep down that it would be unforgettable. And so, it began, the story that would change everything. Stay with me, because this tale holds surprises you'll never see coming. The house felt strangely calm, almost unnaturally so, as if it were holding its breath. But the stillness didn't linger. Soon, the rhythmic sound of footsteps descending the stairs broke the silence. Eric was awake. He appeared in the doorway, his casual t-shirt slightly wrinkled, his hair tousled in a way that made him look effortlessly appealing. "Good morning, Daisy," he greeted, his voice carrying a soft, unhurried tone. His gaze met mine directly, and a faint yet undeniable smile played on his lips. "Something smells incredible in here. What are you making?" Before I could answer, Eric stepped closer. His hand lightly brushed my waist as he leaned in, inhaling the aroma coming from the kitchen. "Smells delicious," he added, his voice playful yet with an undertone of sincerity. That fleeting touch caught me off guard, not unpleasantly, but enough to make my breath hitch for just a moment. Somehow, it didn't feel intrusive. It felt oddly natural. "Would you like some?" I asked, trying to steady myself. "Anything you make, I'll eat," he replied, his eyes lingering on me, as though I were the only thing in the room that mattered. As we sat down at the breakfast table, the air between us felt charged, the space somehow smaller than it should have been. Eric spoke with his usual relaxed charm, but there was something different in his tone, an intensity that hadn't been there before. Out of nowhere, he said, "You know, Daisy, you're stunning for your age." The words caught me completely off guard. My hand froze mid-air, and I carefully set my fork down on the table. "I mean it," he continued, his voice unwavering. "You're the most captivating person I've ever seen." "Eric, you shouldn't say things like that," I replied with a soft laugh, trying to lighten the moment, though my cheeks burned with the warmth of his unexpected compliment. "Thank you, but you're exaggerating." He tilted his head slightly, his eyes scanning me as if he were memorizing every detail. "I'm not exaggerating," he said calmly. "If I were in my uncle's place, I wouldn't leave you alone for a second." I couldn't find the words to respond. The weight of his statement hung in the air, leaving me scrambling for a way to steer the conversation in a different direction. I stood abruptly, gathering the empty plates as an excuse to move. Eric leaned back in his chair, His posture relaxed but his eyes following my every move. It was as if he were studying me, taking in even the smallest of details. "Uncle mentioned you're buying the house. Wouldn't it be a shame not to celebrate?" Eric's tone was light, but his suggestion carried a certain weight. "It's not finalized yet," I replied, a small, involuntary smile tugging at the corners of my lips. "But sure, I guess we can celebrate." "Great. Let's do something tonight. Just the two of us," he said with enthusiasm. "You should dress up, wear something nice. We'll take a few pictures and send them to him. Tell him not to come back until he seals the deal. Let him know we've already started the party." I hesitated, unsure of how to respond. "Eric, I don't want to disappoint you, but—" "No need to overthink it," he cut me off. His voice cheerful but with a firm undertone. "You're still young, Daisy. You've got such an incredible figure. Wear one of those old dresses from your younger days. Honestly, I'm curious to see how you'd look in one." Before I could process his words fully, he added with a mischievous grin, "Come on, don't leave me hanging. Let's make it a night to remember." His unexpected suggestion left me momentarily speechless. Eric's earnest gaze locked onto mine, leaving me unable to come up with anything other than a soft, "All right. We'll see." His face lit up instantly. "It's going to be perfect, Daisy," he said, his eyes gleaming with anticipation, hinting at an unforgettable evening ahead. As I stood there, Anthony's voice echoed in my mind. "He's a sensitive boy, Daisy. Look after him. He needs to pull himself together before university." But Eric's behavior didn't align with that description at all. This wasn't the reserved, hesitant young man Anthony had spoken of. Eric was confident, playful, and surprisingly bold. His energy stirred a mix of confusion and a strange sense of excitement within me. The thought of his suggestion lingered. At first, I questioned whether a celebration was really necessary, but as the day went on, I found myself reconsidering. Perhaps Eric did need and deserve some special attention. Determined to make the evening special, I decided to prepare a meal he'd love. I spent the afternoon making his favorite dishes: aromatic chicken curry, creamy pasta, and a refreshing herb salad. To top it off, I added a side of warm, golden garlic bread. By the time everything was ready, the savory aroma filled the kitchen, setting the perfect tone for the evening to come. Paused to take it in. If this dress still fits, I must have been doing something right, I thought to myself, though the boldness of the outfit made me second-guess my choice. Still, I decided to stick with it. When I made my way downstairs, Eric was already waiting in the living room. He was dressed in a crisp white shirt that complemented his sharp features, and I couldn't ignore the way his eyes stayed on me, taking in every detail. "That dress looks absolutely stunning on you," he said, his voice filled with admiration. I felt a warmth rush to my cheeks as I replied, "Thank you, Eric. And I must say, you're looking quite dashing yourself." He flashed a charming smile and pulled out a chair for me at the dinner table, a gesture that felt both thoughtful and slightly intimate. Dinner started off pleasantly, the warm ambience matching the delightful aroma of the food. Eric was effortlessly witty and sincere, keeping the conversation flowing easily. But there was something more in the way he looked at me. His gaze lingered just a moment too long, making me feel both self-conscious and strangely flattered. I couldn't shake the sense that this evening wasn't going to be ordinary. Leaning in slightly across the table, Eric's tone dropped to something deeper, almost intimate. "Daisy, thank you for tonight. Everything you've done is incredible, but I can't help thinking it could be even better. More exciting," he said, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that left me momentarily frozen. There was something in his look, a longing, a spark of desire, that made my pulse quicken. My mind raced as I tried to gather my composure, a nervous smile creeping across my lips. Sensing my unease, Eric grinned, his expression turning playful in an attempt to break the tension. "How about we give Uncle a call?" he suggested, pulling out his phone before I could respond. Within moments, he was standing behind my chair, his hands resting lightly on my shoulders. The warmth of his touch seeped through the fabric, sending an involuntary shiver down my spine. My heart raced as his proximity became almost tangible, his breath brushing close to my ear. When Anthony's familiar face appeared on the screen, Eric's tone shifted to an upbeat and cheerful note. "Uncle, we've already started celebrating," he announced enthusiastically. He angled the camera toward the table, showcasing the spread of food I had prepared. That's when I noticed I was in the frame too. Eric was still standing behind me, his hands casually placed on my shoulders, his face close to mine. Anthony chuckled at the sight, his voice warm and amused. I wanted to move out of the camera's view to escape the situation, but the thought of dampening Anthony's cheerful mood held me back. All right, Anthony said with a laugh. "I'll check out the house and head back as soon as I can. You two keep enjoying yourselves." As Eric ended the call, I exhaled deeply, though the release did little to steady the flurry of emotions swirling inside me. My mind drifted to Eric's previous visits. Back then, he'd always carried an air of light-hearted mischief that I found charming, but this time, there was something undeniably different about him. His newfound confidence and charisma were impossible to ignore, and they awakened feelings I hadn't experienced in years. I couldn't help but compare this moment to my marriage with Anthony. How long had it been since he truly noticed me, saw me for who I was? Lately, his attention had been consumed entirely by his work, leaving me feeling invisible, like a ghost in my own home. Now, in just a short span of time, Eric's words and gaze had reminded me of something I hadn't realized I'd been yearning for. The sensation of being desired, noticed, alive. Lost in this cascade of thoughts, I didn't notice Eric moving until he stood near the corner of the living room. His movements broke my reverie as he connected his phone to the speaker. A soft, romantic melody began to fill the space, blending seamlessly with the dim glow of the lights. When I turned toward him, his eyes were fixed on mine, his expression calm yet brimming with determination. Stepping closer, he extended his hand toward me. "Daisy, would you dance with me?" he asked, his voice gentle, yet it carried a conviction that was hard to resist. His unexpected request caught me off guard. My heart thundered in my chest, the rhythm deafening in my ears. "Eric, are you sure?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. His smile widened, warm and reassuring as he reached his hand out further. "I'm sure. Just a dance, Daisy. Don't you think we deserve a little fun tonight?" At that moment, the whirlwind of confusion and inner conflict faded into the background, replaced by something else entirely, something I couldn't quite name. Hesitantly, yet unable to resist, I placed my hand in his. The instant his warm fingers wrapped around mine, an undeniable spark ignited within me. Without a word, Eric guided me gently to the center of the living room. One of his hands rested lightly on my waist, while the other held mine firmly yet tenderly. The soft glow of the lights mingled with the rhythmic visuals playing on the TV, creating an atmosphere that felt dreamlike. The music wrapped around us, drawing us deeper into the moment. As we began to dance, Eric's grip on my waist grew firmer, his fingers pressing just enough to send shivers up my spine. My heartbeat quickened, pounding in sync with our steps. When I tilted my head to meet his eyes, I found his gaze fixed on me. It was unyielding, filled with a fervent passion and determination that left me breathless. That look, it unraveled something deep within me, stirring emotions I hadn't dared to confront in years. As we moved together, the space between us seemed to dissolve entirely. Eric's face edged closer, the warmth of his breath brushing against my skin. The proximity was intoxicating, amplifying the magnetic pull that had been building between us. The resistance I thought I could summon crumbled, leaving me utterly defenseless against the moment. Swaying to the music, Eric leaned in just enough for his words to reach my ear in a soft, velvety whisper. "Daisy, I can feel the fire of youth and longing in you. It's in your eyes, in every move you make. You've locked it away, but it's still there, yearning for freedom, even if just for a fleeting moment. Don't you see? That spark keeps you alive, keeps you timeless." His tone was gentle, but every word landed with a weight that cut straight through my composure. Waves of emotion crashed over me. Excitement, confusion, fear, all colliding in a chaos I could barely contain. My breath quickened, my heart racing as I fought against the awakening he had stirred within me. "Eric, what are you doing to me?" I murmured, my voice trembling, barely audible above the music. "You're stirring up things I've worked so hard to bury. Please don't." But even as I spoke, a part of me couldn't help but want to understand. His words hinted at a truth I hadn't dared to acknowledge, and despite my resistance, I craved to know what it was. Eric paused, his movements slowing as his eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that was almost unbearable. He studied me carefully, as if searching for the right moment to reveal something profound. "There's a truth about you, Daisy, a truth you've hidden even from yourself," he said softly, his voice steady yet laced with emotion. I could feel the tension between us peaking, an invisible thread pulling tighter with every passing second. My gaze, as though under a spell, remained locked on his. "What truth, Eric? Tell me," I said, my voice quivering under the weight of anticipation. The air between us was electric, charged with an energy that seemed ready to explode. His words sent shockwaves through me, leaving my emotions in turmoil. I opened my mouth to respond, but no sound came out, just a shallow, shaky breath. My heart raced as I whispered, "How, Eric?" The quietness of my voice betrayed the storm raging within me. I couldn't pretend anymore. The emotions I had buried so deeply were now erupting, overwhelming me with their force. Fear mingled with a longing I couldn't ignore. I was caught between wanting to run and never wanting this moment to end. Eric held my gaze, his eyes searching mine with a quiet intensity. The silence between us stretched, thick and charged. Then, without a word of warning, he closed the space between us. His lips brushed against mine, igniting a fire I didn't know still burned within me. The kiss was electric, a collision of emotions that had been simmering beneath the surface for far too long. My heart hammered against my chest as I surrendered to the moment, my fears melting into the heat of his touch. The world seemed to blur, leaving only the two of us in the charged atmosphere of the room. Eric pulled back slightly, his breathing uneven, his face mere inches from mine. "See, I knew you felt it too," he murmured, his voice low but unwavering, brimming with certainty. His words left no room for denial, and when his lips found mine again, all thoughts of resistance vanished. This time, the kiss deepened, becoming more fervent, more consuming. My body moved instinctively, leaning into him as though seeking an anchor in the chaos. My hands found their way to his shoulders, gripping tightly as if afraid of falling, though in a way I already had. The intensity of it all was dizzying, yet I felt utterly alive. His boldness should have unnerved me, but instead it drew me in, making it impossible to think of anything but him. "I can't fight this anymore," I whispered, my voice fragile yet resolute. "Even if it's wrong, I don't care. I want to feel everything." As the weight of my admission hung in the air, I reached up without hesitation. My fingers found the delicate straps of my dress, pulling them down in one fluid motion. The silk fabric glided off my body, pooling at my feet, leaving me exposed in every sense of the word. Eric's reaction was instant. His eyes widened briefly, a flash of surprise crossing his face before it softened into an expression of unfiltered admiration. His gaze lingered on me, filled with a reverence that made me feel both vulnerable and powerful at the same time. The intensity of the moment wrapped around us, pulling me even deeper into the whirlwind we had created. My heart pounded wildly in my chest as reality blurred into something surreal, and I found myself letting go of any remaining hesitation. I gave in to the moment completely and utterly. Eric's movements were measured yet deliberate as he slowly unbuttoned his shirt, the fabric slipping from his shoulders and falling silently to the floor beside my discarded dress. In that instant, every barrier that had once stood between us seemed to dissolve, leaving nothing but raw vulnerability and an unspoken connection. As I reclined against the couch, Eric leaned over me with a deliberate slowness, his movements purposeful but unhurried. He positioned himself carefully, his knees bracketing my sides, closing any remaining distance between us. Our breaths mingled in the charged space between us, each exhale carrying the weight of anticipation. My eyes locked onto his, drawn irresistibly to the passion and determination that burned within them. His presence was overwhelming, a warmth that seeped into every corner of my being. When his breath ghosted against the sensitive skin of my neck, a shiver ran down my spine, an undeniable response to the electrifying tension. "Are you ready?" he murmured, his voice low and charged with emotion. The intensity in his gaze held both longing and certainty, as though he knew this was a threshold we couldn't return from. My lips parted slightly, the words catching in my throat as I tried to steady my breathing. My thoughts were scattered, a chaotic whirlwind of emotions, yet I was utterly captivated by the gravity of the moment. Finally, I managed to whisper, "Yeah," my voice trembling but laced with excitement I couldn't conceal. In that instant, something shifted within me. I felt it, a realization that nothing would ever be the same again, that we had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. My heart raced faster, each beat echoing the irrevocable change about to unfold. Eric's movements quickened, his deliberate pace replaced by an urgency that matched the heat of the moment. My body reacted instinctively, as though every nerve and muscle had a will of its own. My legs, which had felt forgotten moments before, trembled uncontrollably, a physical manifestation of the storm raging within me. The moment was overwhelming, a cascade of sensations and emotions that blurred the boundaries of time and space. Every fiber of my being was consumed by the connection between us, leaving no room for doubt or hesitation. But then, just as the intensity of the moment reached its peak, Eric halted, and we exchanged positions. I found myself on top, looking down at him. The pace quickened, my movements becoming more urgent, and Eric's breath hitched, his voice trembling as he spoke, "I'm feeling your energy even more now." His entire body seemed to shudder, a wave of release washing over him as he finally let go. I reached for his hand, my voice soft but insistent. "Come on, let's move to the bed." Eric rose with deliberate slowness, his movements steady, as we walked together toward the bedroom. The soft glow of candlelight greeted us, casting shadows that danced across the room, enveloping us in a tranquil, almost dreamlike atmosphere. We sank onto the bed, and Eric pulled me close, wrapping his arm around my waist. I rested my head against his chest, the steady beat of his heart grounding me in that moment. The world outside seemed to disappear, leaving nothing but the comfort of his presence, his warmth. For a moment, I allowed myself to simply exist in the calm, the peace of being right there with him. As my eyelids grew heavy, the thought of Anthony returning began to surface. 2 more days, just me and Eric, before everything would shift again. The idea stirred up a whirlwind of emotions, excitement, guilt, and longing. But in that instant, I chose not to dwell on the complexities of the situation. I inhaled deeply, exhaling the confusion, and let myself fall into the quiet. That's all, and I'll see you in the next story.